What's up, Star Wars nerds, and welcome to another episode of Brett on Fett. On today's episode, I'll be ranking all 10 of the Black Series Carbonized figures, as Hasbro calls it quits on that line. Also, we'll be taking a quick in-hand look at the brand new Darktrooper figure for the Black Series. Let's get to it.
Bye, Felicia.
Y'all stingy.
Welcome back to the channel. This is episode 34 of Brett on Fett. And ever since season 2 of The Mandalorian aired on Disney Plus way back in the fall of 2020, Star Wars collectors have been pining for a Darktrooper figure. Well, it took Hasbro a long time to announce one, but they eventually did for the Black Series back in February 2022. And shortly after that, pre-orders went on sale. Well, recently, those pre-orders have been getting filled here in the United States, as Darktroopers have been showing up on people's porches, including mine last week. So I just wanted to give you guys a quick look at the Darktrooper in hand and give you some of my initial thoughts on it. Let's take a look. It's been a long time coming, but here he finally is, the Darktrooper for the Black Series. What an awesome figure. But let's quickly take a look at the packaging. See, I've left his extra hands in the packaging that form his fists to reenact that punching scene. He's also got the fire effects. And there's the awesome artwork on the side. Hasbro rarely lets us down with the art on these Phase 4 Galaxy packaging. And there's the description of the character there on the back. So pretty standard. This is considered a deluxe figure. Probably because of the size of the figure itself. And taking a look at him, one thing I noticed is the shoulder pads are kind of like a hard plastic separate from the rest of the figure. And it looks as if it might be able to come off there, but I don't want to really risk trying to take it off. Now, mine did have some scuffing on the backpack, and I'm pretty sure that's just a defect on mine and not standard. The head has pretty good movement there. You got plenty of joints to work with. He's very articulated. The articulation is very impressive. There's a crunch joint. And taking a look at the little innards of the droid itself is really awesome. There's a look at the back of it. Very impressed with, again, the articulation and all the little parts on this guy. It's kind of got this feel that, you know, he's got these armor plating around what's definitely a droid with all kinds of droid parts underneath. Whether they're there or not, there's enough to see that it makes it believable that, you know, those droid parts are under there. And taking a look at the articulation at the legs, you can see there is plenty of rotation in the knees and at the ankles, so you can get this guy in all kinds of different poses. And aside from the impressive articulation, one of my favorite things about this figure is how they went with the glossy black finish. This was an excellent choice. It matches the look of the Darktroopers on the show. Had they just gone with a regular matte black plastic, it would not have been as nearly as impressive. So really good choice. Really glad they went with that glossy black. I'd say I had very high expectations for this figure based on what I'd seen from Hasbro, and I'd say it met those expectations and maybe exceeded a little bit with respect to the articulation. For some reason, I thought, given that this is a droid that is, you know, carries itself rather stiff on the show, that maybe they wouldn't have bothered putting so much articulation into it, but I'm glad they did. So this was an awesome, awesome figure, highly recommended. Alright, so moving on to the main topic of today's episode, that being the Black Series Carbonized line. Now, back in 2019, Hasbro released 4 figures for the Carbonized line, followed shortly thereafter in 2020 with 3 more figures under the Empire Strikes Back 40th anniversary. And then again in 2022, early 2022, Hasbro released 3 more figures in the Phase 4 packaging, or also known as a Galaxy packaging. Now, you may be aware that with that latest wave of carbonized figures, sales were abysmal, as figures were warming the pegs and pictures were going viral of hundreds of these figures just sitting on the shelves at Target. And it eventually led to Target having to put these on clearance and discounting them heavily to get them out the door. And so recently, Hasbro did reveal that they will be discontinuing the carbonized line for the Black Series, at least for now. And so for this episode, I just kind of wanted to say my goodbye to the line by ranking all the carbonized figures for the Black Series from worst to best and giving you my thoughts on the line. Now, if you're not familiar with the carbonized Black Series, it's simply a line of previously released figures that Hasbro repainted with a much more metallic look. And a lot of Black Series collectors felt like this was a gimmick and just didn't care for the figures. And I understand why, because the look of these carbonized figures is not canon to the source material. And so if you're a collector that's getting the Black Series figures and posing them in different scenarios, you're not going to want to use a carbonized version figure because it just won't look right. But for other collectors, such as me personally, I didn't mind the carbonized collection because as long as Hasbro was giving me the canon version of the figure, I don't mind another alternate version as long as it looks cool and is good for display. And so that's why I liked the majority of the carbonized figures, because I thought they looked good, mint in box on the shelf. It just looked cool to me. Now that being said, I do 100% agree with Hasbro's decision to discontinue the line, because having all those figures sitting on the shelves not selling and having to go to clearance is really not good for any of us in the hobby. And so I'm here to say goodbye to the carbonized figures. I thought overall they were pretty cool and glad that they were made, but it is time to move on for now. So with that, I do want to go over my rankings for all the carbonized figures, and I've actually got 4 figures picked out that I truly believe are actually better than the original versions of those figures, and I'll explain each one of those as we get there. So let's take a look at my rankings for the carbonized Black Series figures. Alright, so kicking off my rankings for the carbonized Black Series figures, at number 10 I had the Scout Trooper from The Mandalorian. In my opinion, by far the worst carbonized figure that Hasbro put out for the Black Series. I just thought this was just not a good looking figure. I didn't understand putting this metallic look to this kind of dirty remnant Scout Trooper from the show. It's the only carbonized figure I did not buy just because I just was not feeling this one. And I do believe this figure was a major contributor to the downfall of the carbonized line. I mean, I can't tell you how many times I saw tons of these figures just sitting on the shelves at Target, no one buying them, and for good reason. It just looks weird. It's just not an appealing figure in my opinion. Coming in at number 9, I have the Shore Trooper from The Mandalorian. Now, I love Shore Troopers. They're some of my favorite designs for Stormtroopers, so I had to have this one. And taking a look at the packaging, you know, with this Galaxy style packaging interface for carbonized figures, they went with that gunmetal gray style art, which I kind of liked because it just made me think of carbonized. So that's pretty cool. But on the figure itself, my issue with this is the gold. I just don't really like the look of gold on these troopers. It reminds me of that Captain Pyre from that Resistance show. I just thought he's kind of cheesy looking. You know, maybe that's just a personal opinion. But that was my only issue with this figure. The paint apps themselves are pretty good. I just didn't like the gold. I think it would have looked better if they went with a more of a gunmetal gray or just really just about anything else. Next up at number 8 from The Rise of Skywalker, I have the First Order Jet Trooper. Yeah, I'm not big on the sequel trilogy. I'm not a huge fan. I don't have a lot of figures from those, but I wanted to complete the carbonized Phase 3 set, and I really like the packaging on this. It's kind of a pearl. You can see in certain light. I don't know if y'all can tell on the camera, but it has a little bit of color that comes through there. And the figure itself, I really like the paint job on this. You know, it's kind of that off-white color and a little bit pearly itself, and a pretty cool looking trooper. And I have to say, this is the first on the list that I think the carbonized version is actually superior to the original version of this figure. Taking a quick look at some photos comparing the original version of the Jet Trooper to the carbonized version. Looking at the packaging is not really a fair comparison because the carbonized version is always going to be superior, in my opinion, to the regular version on any figure. But comparing the figures themselves, you can see the one on the left is the original version. It's just that standard Trooper white we always get, and so I just think it's a little bit dull, a little bit boring. There's not enough to separate him from, say, the regular First Order Troopers. As opposed to the carbonized version on the right, I just think that off-white, kind of pearly finish just gives him a more distinct look. Next up at number 7 from The Mandalorian is The Mandalorian in his Phase 1 armor, if you will, before he got his full-on Beskar armor. And taking a look at the package, really cool bronzy, kind of brown, iridescent color. I like the color of this packaging. Unfortunately, mine is pretty scuffed up. It's got the kind of a Beskar color on the side, and then the bronzy on the back. I've got a price tag residue I got to remove on there. But really cool looking package. I love this package on this guy. But as far as the figure itself, the paint apps are cool, but I think I ranked this guy so low because it really irked me at the missed opportunity by Hasbro to carbonize the Beskar version, and why they chose to carbonize the dirty old non-Beskar version of Mando was just really frustrating to me, because a carbonized Beskar Mando would have been awesome. Coming in at number 6, I have Darth Vader from The Empire Strikes Back. This is part of that 40th anniversary line, and he is a dark metallic blue color on this figure. It's kind of reminiscent of the Ralph McQuarrie concept Vader. And I love this blue metallic look. It's a little bit hard to appreciate on camera. Of course, there's the silver side there, but then on the other side, you've got the dark metallic blue large Vader word printed out, and then an awesome image of Vader himself on the back. So very cool packaging. And again, with this Vader, he's just hard to appreciate on camera. I'm just telling you, he's so much cooler looking when you have him in hand. I love that dark blue look. I think it fits this character very well as an alternative style. And check out the metallic blue hilt on his saber. That is a nice touch. But yeah, he's just really impressive. And you guys just have to take my word for it. When you have him in hand, he looks so much better in person than he does on camera. Coming in at number 5, I have the Second Sister Inquisitor from Jedi Fallen Order. Man, this is one of those figures I'd really love to have in the vintage collection. Very cool design. And taking a look at the packaging, this is like a sort of a gunmetal gray iridescent look. Really cool packaging. I wish mine wasn't so scuffed up. A lot of mine are scuffed up on these, unfortunately. And check out that crimson red iridescent spine. Very nice touch. And then on the other side, you've got the large print of the name. I loved how they did these like that. Very cool. Another awesome image of the Second Sister on the back, along with the description of the character. And taking a look at the figure itself, again, just such a cool design, and the carbonized paint apps really do this character justice. She looks amazing in this style, in my opinion, and she is the second figure on my list that I feel is actually a better version than the original. So let's take a quick look comparing the original to the carbonized version. So again, here is the original version packaging versus the carbonized. No contest, the carbonized just really pops, way cooler looking. Now, taking a look at images for the different versions of this figure, keep in mind these are professional Hasbro figures, and they are making them seem a lot shinier than they actually are in hand. And so the original version may look shiny enough on here. When you look at her in hand, in person, it's a lot duller of a figure. And so I think the carbonized just really makes her helmet and her cape pop the right amount. And again, in hand, even with the carbonized, she's not as shiny as she looks here. So she doesn't look too shiny. She looks the right amount of shiny, in my opinion, if that makes any sense. So I really think this carbonized version is the better version. Now we are getting way out of canon with this one, but my number 4 choice is the Stormtrooper from The Empire Strikes Back. Again, this is from the 40th anniversary line, and this thing is just off the charts cool looking. I know it has nothing to do with anything we've seen in the films or the shows, but man, a silver chromed out Stormtrooper, are you kidding me? This thing is awesome. I love this figure. And looking at it though, I mean, yeah, the packaging is just so ultra reflective and silvery. I love it. I love everything about the packaging. And the figure itself, and he looks so cool. And going back to that Mando, can you imagine if they had done the Beskar version of Mando in this type of silver paint? It would have been so awesome. It still irritates me they didn't do that. But man, this is just fun. You know, it's fun to have something like this every now and then. I really love that Hasbro did this. And it's one of my favorite figures in my collection, believe it or not. And cracking open the top 3, at number 3 I have Boba Fett from The Empire Strikes Back. This is the last of the 40th anniversary line from Carbonized for Empire Strikes Back. And you know, if you watched my episode 1, my very first episode of Bread on Fett, I had this guy ranked as number 10 in my all-time top 10 Boba Fett figures. I love it that much. But looking at the packaging, you know, it's that iridescent style that you guys know I love so much. And I just love this combination of that green and that yellowish gold. Just very cool stuff. Great image of Fett on the back. This really works, in my opinion, on the packaging. And taking a look at the figure itself, it's pretty much the same color scheme as the original, just metallized, with the exception of maybe the green is more of a lighter, kind of a minty green color. But man, I just think he looks so awesome. I know it's not canon. I wouldn't put this guy in a diorama reenacting a scene from the movie. But just putting him on my shelf, he just looks awesome. And I just don't get how anyone could look at this guy and just be angry at Hasbro for making this. Because it just looks so cool. I'm going to throw up an image of them by himself. But yeah, one of my favorite figures as well. Now, I mentioned earlier that I'm not a big fan of the sequel trilogy for Star Wars. So it is ironic that my number 2 pick is from the sequel trilogy. And this one's from The Rise of Skywalker. It is the Sith Trooper. And what an awesome figure this is. Taking a look at the packaging, just that iridescent crimson look. And then this one spine has that dark gunmetal gray iridescent look. Awesome packaging. Let's take a look at the back. It's got a very cool image of the Sith Trooper there. But the real reason I've chosen this as number 2 is the figure itself. This is one of the best Black Series figures overall, in my opinion, let alone just carbonized. And look at the lines and the patterns on the armor, and then underneath the armor, that carbon fiber look. I mean, this is just a premium figure, guys. I really like this one, and so it should be no surprise that this is another one on my list that I feel is better than the original version of this figure. So let's take a little quick comparison look. Once again, it's an unfair comparison, but obviously the carbonized version on the packaging is way cooler looking than the dull black, regular Black Series Phase 3 packaging. And then looking at the figures, you can see the original version on the left. It doesn't look bad, at least it has slightly glossy paint. But when you compare the two, the one on the left, the original version, you can tell it's made out of plastic. It looks like plastic. But when you look at the carbonized version, it just looks like the real deal to me. It looks, I believe that this is metallic armor. The carbonized version of this figure just looks so awesome, and it's just so obvious that he's better than the original version to me. And for my number one pick for the Black Series Carbonized line, I have Paz Vizsla from The Mandalorian, aka the Heavy Infantry Mandalorian. Let's take a quick look at the packaging. Again, it's from that same wave, the Galaxy packaging, Phase 4 packaging with that gunmetal gray style artwork. Pretty cool looking, but the packaging is not why I chose this guy as number one. It is really all about the figure. And if you've watched my channel for a while, you may recall that I did an episode on this guy, and he was my very first Black Series figure to take out of the packaging. This is where I started to become an opener for Black Series, and it's because of him, and it's because I love everything about this figure. I love all the paint apps on him, and I think this is how Mandalorian troopers should be done. They should all be done with this kind of metallized paint job. He just looks so much better like this. Just very cool. Highly posable figure, by the way. Check out my review I did on my previous episode. And it's really one of my favorite Black Series of all time. It really is. I know that sounds like a hot take to call a carbonized figure one of my favorites, but he is in my top 3 and maybe my very favorite. I gotta think about that, but he's definitely in my top 3 all-time favorite Black Series figures. This guy looks awesome. So of course I think he's better than the original version. So taking a look again at the packaging, no competition there of course, but at the figure itself, there's nothing wrong with the original version. It's fine. But it's just the carbonized version looks so much better. It looks more, again, like it's metal armor, I believe that this is Beskar he's wearing versus the original version. I'm not buying that that's Beskar. And again, I think all the Mandos, at least the ones that are supposed to be wearing Beskar armor, should get this carbonized treatment for the paint apps. It just looks so much more realistic to me. And so here's one last look at my champion of the Black Series Carbonized figures, Paz Vizsla, looking pretty awesome standing in front of the rest of my carbonized figures, which are still sealed in box. And once again, I do think Hasbro made the right call by ending this series, at least for now. But at the same time, I'm very glad they made these. I enjoy these figures in my collection. I think they look awesome on display. And if in a few years Hasbro decides they want to give it another go and release, maybe 2 or 3 more carbonized figures, I'd be good with that, as long as Hasbro's smart about it and makes some good choices on what figures they do, the color choices they make, and how they go about promoting it. So that's going to do it for this episode of Brett on Fett. Let me know in the comments what you thought about the carbonized line for the Black Series. And if you did enjoy the carbonized figures, let me know what your favorite one was. Thanks for checking out this video. Thanks as always to my subscribers. Don't forget you can also follow me on Instagram and on Twitter. Take care and we'll see you next time.